Chapter 25. A Friend in Need. Zeus ran through the dark tunnels under King's Cross, and the sound of his boots hitting the damp concrete walls echoed through the tunnels. His helmet automatically switched to night vision, which made the hallway glow a soft green. The shadows on the narrow path twisted and danced, but he didn't slow down because he was focused. Apollo's voice crackled through his comms as he made his way down the winding hallway. "I've been keeping an eye on your vital signs, sir. I have to say, your mood has gotten a lot better since yesterday." "Yeah," Zeus said, sounding relieved. "Saving those people and knowing Connor is safe took a lot of stress off my shoulders." "But," he stopped talking, the thought bothering him, "I keep thinking about whether or not I should tell Connor the truth. About who I really am." Apollo's voice was calm and practical. "It might seem like the right thing to do, but I advise you to be careful. Telling someone who you are could make your friendship harder and maybe even endanger it." "Sir, think about what will happen." Even though Apollo couldn't see him, Zeus nodded. The AI's words echoed the quiet worry in his own mind. He hated the idea of lying to Connor, but he knew that the truth would put both of them in danger. At that moment, a new message appeared on his HUD. A call request from Anne Shang. He felt sick when he realized that his phone was still connected to the nanolinker, which meant he could still get calls while he was in his armor. He agreed and quickly switched to audio only so she couldn't see where he was. "Finally?" Anne's voice came through, a mix of worry and anger. "I've been trying to reach you for ages now." The line kept telling me it was busy. "Hey, Anne," Zeus said, trying to sound casual as he leaned against the cold wall of the tunnel. His voice was calm enough, but he knew she could probably feel the edge. "Where the hell have you been, Nick?" she yelled. "Everyone at the mansion is worried sick. I heard about the hijacking and thought something bad had happened to you." "Calm down," he said, forcing himself to sound calm. "We were all taken out of the station. I'm okay. I'm just waiting for my friend now." His HUD showed the EMD newsfeed while he talked. A headline that read, "Terrorist Train Plot, Foiled by Spartan Intervention," scrolled across the corner of his vision. He prepared himself mentally. He said, "I'm close to the station. The news says the Spartans stopped everything before it got too bad." "Good," she said, but there was still a worried tone in her voice. "But don't stay too long, okay? Come home with your friend. Text me as soon as you get back." "I will." "Promise," he said. "Take care." He hung up the phone and let out a long breath. It was too easy for him to lie, but he needed the moment of calm it gave him. He pushed off the wall and ran again, his eyes on the far exit of the tunnel and the reunion that was waiting for him on the other side. Zeus came out of the dark tunnel and into King's Cross Station. The change from tight, dark spaces to wide, open spaces was shocking. He stopped at the edge of the shadows, where the pale lights above the station gave it a sterile, ghostly glow. The usual crowd of rushing commuters, echoing announcements, and rumbling trains was gone. Instead, there was a stillness so deep that it felt wrong, an eerie silence that hung in the air like a fog of death. "Do you see this, Apollo?" Zeus whispered, his voice barely audible through his helmet. His eyes moved over the empty platforms and the long, empty concourse in front of him. I've never been to a train station this quiet. Xerxes successfully evacuated the civilians, sir, Apollo said in a calm, precise voice. As he talked, Zeus's visor showed updated CCTV feeds from different angles around the station. The video showed Xerxes' guards with a lot of weapons patrolling in a very organized way. Their movements were stiff and their presence imposing. Apollo said they were led to the main entrance, just like Captain Rhodes said it would. The guards are the only ones left, and they are still keeping watch over the area. Zeus carefully looked over the feeds to decide what to do next. He needed a way to get off the tracks and up to the platform without being seen that was clean. Should we let Xerxes know that we were in charge of things? He asked, only half seriously. Apollo warned, that would not be a good idea, sir. Even though Xerxes and the Spartans were hired as London's main security force, they have never kept a friendly relationship. Why? Zeus asked, his eyes narrowing with interest as he looked for a blind spot. Apollo said, the conflict goes back over 2,000 years, and his voice took on a lecturing tone. The Spartans fight for freedom, democracy, and the people, and they are not tied to any nation or political group. But Xerxes only helps those who pay them the most. Zeus laughed, and the static made his voice sound bitter. Yeah, rich jerks who pay to keep themselves safe and ignore everyone else. That's right, Apollo said. Their loyalty is based on business. There is still a lot of debate about the emperor's decision to hire them, but their presence has helped keep foreign attacks at bay. They are still capable of abusing their power, though. Zeus climbed up onto the platform, and the noise of King's Cross Station crashed down around him in a confusing wave. People talking, people running, and radios crackling, all mixed together to make a storm of noise that didn't sound right. After the strange quiet of the tunnel, every sound seemed too sharp and loud. He looked around. The station was full of activity, with Xerxes' guards patrolling in tight groups, their eyes sharp and weapons ready. He had to go away, quick. I need to find a private place to demorph, he said quietly as he ducked behind a steel column. I want to blend in with the others and wait for Connor. Just act like another survivor, not Zeus. As he walked, his armor made a faint clanking sound, reminding him that he was still too visible and exposed. If the wrong person saw him now, everything could fall apart. Hey, Apollo, do you have any ideas on how to make this work? He asked quietly, looking around for a way out. Sir, Apollo said without stopping, there's an open window on the northeast side of the station roof. You can get to it from the service scaffolding if you use your grapple hook. It will give you the freedom you need. There is also a stairway behind the ventilation units that goes down to the street. I'll keep an eye on local feeds and let you know if there are any threats. Thanks, Apollo. I knew I could count on you. He slipped into a small space between two kiosks and raised his wrist. The grapple launcher made a metallic click as it opened. He shot at the stone ledge above. The hook clicked into place. Zeus shot up into the air. As he climbed, the wind bit at his face and the concrete scraped against his gauntlets. The armor was heavy on his limbs, but he kept going, straining his muscles with each pull-up. Don't look down, sir, Apollo said to help. You're now 60 feet above the ground. Zeus let out a sharp breath and sweat started to form on his forehead. Great timing, Apollo. Very helpful. And, Apollo said, his voice calm but urgent, a Xerxes guard is coming up from the south platform. You have to go. Now. Without thinking, Zeus aimed his grapple hook at the narrow edge of the window this time. The cable shot out and caught. He swung himself across, and as he climbed higher, his boots scraped the stone. His shoulders hurt from the strain, but he pushed himself through the opening and rolled onto the roof. He lay still for a moment, his chest rising and falling. The city lay out in front of him, with rooftops, spires, and the grey wash of a cloudy sky. When Zeus landed quietly on the roof, which was full of solar panels and humming air conditioners, he felt the heavy weight of tiredness on him. When his back hit the gravel-covered ground with a dull thud, the pain in his muscles flared up like a warning flare. He had used up all of his strength climbing that wall, squeezing through tunnels and fighting Leonard Payne. He lay there for a second, taking a breath, while the grey sky spun slowly above him. He muttered, "Fuck me," and winced as he forced himself to stand up. I need to start training every single day if I want to keep doing this. Sir, would you like me to suggest a diet that is good for workouts at the military level? Apollo chimed in, his voice as dry and clinical as always. Nick chuckled tiredly. He said, "Cheeky git," and smiled, even though he didn't want to. "I wasn't joking, sir," Apollo said flatly. But Nick could swear he heard the tiniest hint of sass in his voice. He shook his head, laughing. "Let's get off this roof before we talk about protein shakes and macro splits," he said as he stood up. The wind bit his cheeks, making him remember how open he was. He looked over the roof, which was empty except for the humming solar panels, the humming vents, and his own breath. "Besides," he said in a softer voice, "May is cooking tonight. That's all the motivation I need." Zeus started the demorph process when the coast was clear. The armor peeled off with a familiar hiss, and the nanomites retreated into the nanolinker on Nick's wrist. The pressure on his arms and chest got better. Nick Adams stood alone on the roof again when it was over. He was tired, sore, and still himself. He pulled his hoodie down, ran a hand through his messy hair, and took a deep breath. "Apollo, is there anyone at the bottom of the stairs?" he asked, squinting over the edge. "One moment." "Scanning," Apollo said. Then there was a brief pause before the AI said, "Area clear." There was no movement on any of the surveillance feeds that were connected. "If anything changes, I'll let you know right away." "Thanks," Nick said, grateful for the eyes in the sky. He walked up to the old metal stairs that were hidden behind a bank of service ducts. The frame creaked softly as he stepped on the first step, and the sound echoed through the alley below. The railings were rusty, and the corners were dirty. This was an old stairway that only maintenance workers and rooftop technicians used. He felt a strange sense of calm as he went down. The noise of the train, the rush of battle, and even the emotional tightrope of talking to Anne all started to fade into the background. He had survived the storm. Nick finally stepped out onto Pancras Road. The cold winter air brushed against his face, and the tension that had been building in him slowly began to go away. Just 2 hours before, the street had been closed off because of the threat of a terrorist attack. Now that the threat was over, the barriers had come down, and things were starting to feel normal again. Pedestrians went back to their normal routines, but they walked a little more slowly. Cars drove by again, their engines humming as if to drown out the memory of the chaos. There was a lot of life in the air, but there was also a sense of fear that lingered, like the sound of a storm that had just passed. Nick walked quickly down the pavement and saw that the doors to both King's Cross and St Pancras International were still closed to the public. Police, firefighters, and medics were still at key locations, making sure the area was safe and that nothing had been missed. Then his phone rang in his pocket. He pulled it free, and the screen lit up with a message from Connor. "Nick, where are you? The police are taking me and the other passengers outside." Nick's fingers flew across the keypad as he typed back. "At last. I couldn't get through before because the network was busy. I'm waiting right outside the front of the station. I'm glad you're okay." He felt a rush of excitement. As he walked to the station plaza, his walk turned into a jog. When he turned the corner, he saw a growing crowd in front of a huge hollow TV screen that floated above the ground like a silent god. The 24/7 live news feed from EMD flickered brightly, lighting up the faces of dozens of people who were looking up. The mood was tense, with relief and awe mixing as people listened to every word spoken by the calm anchor woman, Stacey Watson. "Well, Stuart," she said, her voice calm but firm, "it looks like the Black Death's plan to destroy King's Cross Station and kill hundreds of passengers on a hijacked train has been stopped, thanks to the quick and strong actions of the Spartan team and the police. We're glad to be able to say that all passengers have been safely evacuated and the threat has been stopped." The crowd cheered in waves, people applauded, a few people cried. A woman held her partner's hand tighter, and a man kissed his child's forehead. During the quiet times between applause, people felt both thankful and shocked. Nick stood at the edge of it all, with his hood up and his face turned away from the screen. He didn't want to take the chance of being recognized, even though no one would think of a teenage boy as the armored figure who had saved them. Still, he was naturally cautious now. Even though he looked calm, he was very proud. No one here knew it, but he was on that mission. He, Gina, and the Jones brothers had stopped a disaster. The crowd were thankful for him too, even though they didn't say so. He took a deep breath and told himself to stay in character. "You are Nick Adams. A person who lived, someone who isn't involved. I'm just glad your best friend made it out alive." Nick kept one hand in his pocket and the other loose at his side as he waited for Connor to come out of the crowd. He kept looking back and forth between the door and the big screen. He could barely hear the news anchor's voice, but the real noise was coming from inside him. His racing thoughts, his rising adrenaline, and the quiet, unshakable truth that his world had changed. Eventually, Nick saw a queue of armed police officers leading the rescued passengers through the front door. Seeing that made me feel better. It was a comforting reminder that order was being restored to see the authorities take charge after all the chaos. The crowd he had been a part of surged forward, and people rushed to hug their loved ones. Their cries of joy rose above the noise of the city. Nick's heart raced as he quickly looked over the crowd of faces, looking for the one person he needed to see the most. He had thought about this moment many times since the ordeal began, The moment he would see Connor again, safe and sound. He looked at strangers until he finally saw something he couldn't miss. A flash of bright blue hair cutting through the crowd like a beacon. There he was. Connor stood out just like Nick had hoped. He looked a little messy and was dragging his suitcase covered in colourful anime and video game stickers, which showed how unique he was. Nick felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Connor," he called, his voice breaking a little because he was so upset. He pushed his way through the crowd, weaving past families and people yelling reunions. When Connor heard the sound, he turned around and his face lit up with recognition and relief. Nick. They crashed into each other in a tight hug, and all the stress of the day went away in that one moment. Nick said softly, "I'm so glad you're okay," pulling back just enough to look his friend in the eye. "I was so worried." "I'm fine." "It was crazy in there," Connor said, his voice shaky and his eyes still wide with adrenaline. "But I knew you'd be here." Nick smiled a little, proud of himself. "Of course I'm here. That's what friends do. I wasn't going to leave you." There was a lot of noise in the background at King's Cross, families getting back together, police still giving orders, and medics taking care of shaken passengers. But for Nick, everything faded away. He got his friend back. That was all that was important. Nick said, "Let's get out of here," and looked back at the station one last time. "I could really use a break." "Same," Connor said with a shaky laugh. "We both deserve it after today." Nick glanced quickly at the entrance to the underground and made a face. There were already a lot of evacuees being sent to other places, and he didn't want to push through the crowd. Instead, he pulled out his phone from his jacket and tapped it. "Auto taxi is our best bet." A few minutes later, a sleek black cab pulled up to the curb. Its headlights blinked as the doors opened. The car's AI spoke to them in a clipped, aristocratic voice. "Good evening, sirs. What can I do for you today?" Nick said, "44 Billionaires Road, please," and slid into the back seat next to Connor. "Very good, sir," the cab said in a smooth voice. The doors hissed shut, and the car glided away from the curb and into the stream of traffic, taking them away from the station and the chaos they had left behind. The chaos of King's Cross got smaller in the rearview mirror as the taxi drove away from the station. Nick leaned back in his seat, and the stress of the day faded into a low hum under his skin. He looked at Connor and saw how his friend was staring out the window, his eyes far away and haunted by what had just happened. Nick started softly, keeping his voice low, and said, "So, how are you doing, Connor?" Connor turned to look at him instead of the city streets. "I won't lie, Nick. I'm still shaken up. I really thought it was the end for me at one point." Nick nodded slowly to let him talk. "But," Connor said, his voice getting a little brighter, "I'm glad Gina Rhodes and that Zeus guy were there. They saved everyone." He stopped for a moment and tightened his grip on the handle of his suitcase. "If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here." Nick gave a small smile and tried to keep his feelings in check. "Yes, they did come through, right?" "Nick, I wish you could have seen it." Connor's voice suddenly got louder. "Zeus kicked that bald guy off the train and went full-on gladiator mode. I mean, Leonard Payne is huge. like a wall made of bricks. But Zeus just hit him back every time. Gina and her team were going full Spartan, getting rid of Black Death robots like it was nothing, while all of that was going on. Nick smiled and felt warm inside, because Connor was so impressed. Sounds like something from a big movie. That's right. It felt like I had stepped into one of those old superhero movies. All that was missing was a tub of popcorn, Connor said with a grin. His laugh cut through the heaviness like sunlight breaking through clouds. Nick smiled back at him, happy to see that some of the colour had come back to his friend's face. But he kept his tone light and asked questions gently. Did they catch Leonard? Connor's face fell a little and the light dimmed. No, he got away. Just disappeared. That bastard still got away after everything. He sighed and looked down at the floor of the cab. I hope I never see him again. Nick's smile faded, and for a moment his eyes hardened before he hid his feelings. He said softly, You won't. People like him always get what they deserve. Before long. Connor nodded but didn't say anything, clearly trying to get rid of the anxiety that was still there. Nick reached over and squeezed his shoulder hard, which made him feel better and more grounded. Connor's phone rang soon after. He looked at the screen and knew right away who was calling. It's my mum, he told Nick, his voice full of urgency and determination. I have to answer this. Nick nodded in agreement and said, I understand. It's Kasumi. We both know how worried she gets. Nick used the chance to text May while Connor was on the phone. He told her he was in the cab with Connor and on his way back to the mansion. Connor spoke Japanese in a soft, soothing voice. Moshi Moshi, Oka-san. Kasumi's voice came through the receiver in quick bursts of fear. Connor? Are you all right, my sweet boy? Are you okay? Please tell me those terrorists didn't touch you. It's okay, Mom, Connor said softly to her. I'm fine. I didn't get hurt. I'm with Nick right now. We're going to his uncle's big house. There was a short pause before Kasumi spoke again, her voice full of motherly insistence. I want to talk to Nick. Okay, Mom. Connor looked at Nick with respect as he handed over the phone. She wants to talk to you. Nick picked up the phone and spoke in a steady but warm voice. Hi, Mrs. Jenkins. Kasumi said in English, It's so good to hear your voice, Nick-san. Her tone made it clear how relieved she was. I saw the news yesterday. I'm very sorry for David and Sarah. Nick felt a pang of sadness in his chest, but he steadied himself and forced a small, brave smile. Thanks, Kasumi. That means a lot to me. I'm just taking it one day at a time. He didn't say that he had nightmares every night, or that becoming Zeus was the only way he could get away from the empty silence of loss. It wasn't hard to share that with her. Kasumi's voice was firm, but kind, as she said, All the same, I want Connor to keep an eye on you while you're gone. No matter how grown up you try to be, you're still kids. Nick was able to hold back a soft laugh. We'll take care of each other. He has been doing that for me for a long time. When do you think you'll be back home? She asked carefully. Nick's face became serious. I'm not coming back, at least not to live. It isn't safe. I'll come back for the funeral, but after that, I can't stay in Biggleswade. The Black Death could still come for me. Kasumi sighed, her voice full of disappointment, but she understood. It was risky to be the heir to a billionaire's fortune. What about school? Will your uncle sign you up for something? Nick said. He hired a private tutor. She lives in the mansion and is also the maid. A few other people are also staying with us. At that, Connor's eyebrows went up in interest. People who? He leaned in closer and asked. Nick smiled a little. I'll explain when we get there. It's easier to show you. There was a pause on the line before Kasumi spoke again, this time in a calmer voice. I'm glad to hear you're not alone. And at least Connor will be learning with you. But Nick, her voice got a little sharper. While my son is with you, I want you to keep him safe. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll take care of each other. Nick sat up straight in his chair, knowing what she meant. I promise. Also, don't forget that we both took self-defense classes. Everything will be fine. He didn't say anything about the gang he met on the Piccadilly line. She didn't need any more reasons to be worried. Kasumi said softly, Thank you, Nick. You might not be my son, but I love you like one. Even when things seem the worst, don't forget that you still have a family that loves you. Nick said, I will. And there was no doubt in his voice. And I'll keep Connor safe. I promise.